The iconic 1995 movie Judge Dredd recently celebrated its 30th anniversary, and I'm still fascinated by the rich concept and dystopian setting. However, this is certainly not the finest adaptation of the popular comic book character, and the 2012 adaptation is a much more faithful effort. That being said, the original effort does have its merit, and while a lot went wrong for the film, there were some things that worked out just fine. Mega City 1 and the grim reality of this world came to life with the mysterious and determined Judge Dredd in action. In this video, I'll take you down memory lane as I bring you some of the lesser-known amazing facts about the movie and things that make it so iconic. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. A quick history and origin of Judge Dredd in the comic books. Almost 2 decades before the film adaptation, the idea behind Judge Dredd was put together when comics editor Pat Mills was developing 2000 AD in 1976, and he brought in his former writing partner John Wagner to develop the characters. John Wagner had already written a Dirty Harry-style tough cop story called One-Eyed Jack for Valiant, and he suggested a character who was built from these concepts and pushed to the logical extreme. Soon, Mills developed a horror strip called Judge Dredd, which was named after the stage name of British ska and reggae artist Alexander Minto Hughes. The initial script, written by John Wagner, was rewritten by Mills, and the story was set in the distant future. Finally, it all came together in Judge Dredd's first appearance in an advert in 2000 AD back in 1977. It was only in 1983 that Judge Dredd made his American debut with an original series from the publisher Eagle Comics. Judge Dredd shows his face in the 1995 movie. If you're familiar with the Dredd comic book lore, you'll know that tradition dictates that Dredd never takes off his helmet. His face is almost never shown in full, and it only appears once, covered by a censor bar. Thus, it became a major controversy when Dredd took off his helmet in the movie because it was unheard of in the comics. Of course, the producers would not allow an expensive performer like Sylvester Stallone to never show his face clearly, and this version of Dredd was not appreciated by Carl Urban as well, who later explained that he would never want that version of Judge Dredd because he was always supposed to be a faceless icon of justice. Even John Wagner, the creator of the comic character, said that the story in the 1995 film had little to do with Judge Dredd, even though he felt that Sylvester Stallone was perfect for the part, and the production value and budget were truly commendable. The director wasn't happy with the end result. The director, Danny Cannon, was extremely disheartened over his constant creative disputes with the star performer Sylvester Stallone, who obviously had a major say in the making of the movie. Cannon swore that he would never work again with another self-absorbed actor, which was clearly intended for Stallone, and he also claimed that the final version of the film was completely different from what he had originally planned because of all the changes introduced by Stallone. He wasn't entirely wrong, because Sylvester Stallone had never even heard of Judge Dredd until he was offered the role, and he clearly did not understand the gravity of the character. In later interviews, he said that he felt the film was supposed to be a comedy action film, and he demanded rewrites to make it more comedic. The director and screenwriter had intended a darker and satirical approach, but the vision was never complete in the final result. Before the production, Danny Cannon proclaimed that this would be the Ben-Hur of comic book movies, but Stallone had other ideas, and Cannon's vision was compromised heavily. A perfect portrayal of Mega City 1. The 1995 Judge Dredd movie was a big-budget venture, and the high-end production reflected in the visuals. Mega City 1 has been captured perfectly in the film, and it can even compete with the 2012 adaptation with Carl Urban. As you may know, Mega City 1 has always been a huge part of the comic book lore, and it's not just Judge Dredd's home, but a separate character in its own right. The city setting is dark, violent, and quirky, and the perfect portrayal of this world is crucial behind the legacy of the 90s movie. The special effects work on this one is fantastic to watch and feels fresh even today as the dystopia of this city is brought to life. Judge Death almost featured in the movie. I think one of the most iconic and terrifying Judge Dredd villains has to be Judge Death, the creepy, monster-like entity who makes living illegal. However, his appearance would require a skeletal body that was challenging to perfect and extremely expensive. It would have required extensive special effects that would have been difficult to achieve with practical or CGI methods available during the time. Also, the makers felt that it would be impossible to use a real actor for Judge Death and still capture the supernatural and creepy tone that was necessary. Thus, they centered the story on Dredd's conflict with his clone brother Rico, and Rico had more to do with Dredd's past. Maybe the idea was to save Judge Death for a mega sequel so that the stakes would be higher the next time around. Lawmaster bikes were difficult to handle. The massive budget of the film meant that the production team could successfully put together the Lawmaster bikes from scratch. However, these iconic mean machines were so powerful that only the trained stuntmen were capable of handling these bikes. The actors were given safer and low-powered moped versions so that they could cut out the risk of serious injuries. And I have to admit that the Lawmaster bikes look great on screen in the 1995 movie. The entire movie was filmed in England. It took some convincing from the director Danny Cannon for the producers to agree to film Judge Dredd in England. While you might think that the reason behind the choice of England was that it was Judge Dredd's natural home, the real reason was something else. The film technicians in the UK were highly efficient, and Danny Cannon wanted the best for the movie. There were some challenges of shooting the entire movie in England, and one of them was the unpredictable weather and rain. For this reason, they kept the streets wet at all times so that it wouldn't matter if it rained randomly. The movie tried to do too much in too little time. You might be frowning at this point because the general consensus is that the movie failed to include major parts of the mythology and characters from the comic book. However, the movie actually encountered an exactly opposite problem, where it tried to include too much in one story. The runtime of the film is just about 90 minutes, but within this short runtime, the movie included characters and elements from the stories like The Return of Rico, The Judge-Child Quest, The Day the Law Died, and others. It even had bits of narrative from a completely different 2000 AD series, and as you can imagine, it was quite a challenge to fit all that within 90 minutes. Maybe a longer runtime of around 3 hours could have comprehensively combined all the story elements, but the final result ended up offering only glimpses of Dredd's world, and there was nothing that was fully fleshed out here. I personally think that if the movie tried to focus more on Dredd as a judge, instead of covering all these storylines, it would have been a more solid effort. Maybe it was just an attempt to lure in the fans of the comic book as well as those who had no clue about Dredd, but clearly it didn't work as intended. Rob Schneider did not have the best time while filming for Judge Dredd. Not every actor has a good experience while working on a project, even if the project is something as big budget as Judge Dredd. Rob Schneider was reportedly offered the role by Sylvester Stallone after his first choice, Joe Pesci, turned it down. But the actor claimed during an interview that he didn't always get the desired treatment on the sets. For instance, for the fiery exhaust shaft scene, Rob Schneider claimed that the film crew gave Stallone extra fire retardant on the back of his costume, but he was given none at all. He also faced some injuries on the sets, such as when he fell down a flight of stairs on the very first day of shooting. How RoboCop delayed the Judge Dredd movie. This might come across as a shocker for many, but the success of RoboCop in 1987 actually delayed the production of Judge Dredd for years. This is because RoboCop borrowed a lot from the Judge Dredd comics, and there were concerns that a Dredd film would seem like a direct derivative if it was released too soon. The producers and studios hesitated to move ahead with a Judge Dredd adaptation, and they didn't want the audiences to see it as something too similar to RoboCop. As you know, both films featured armored law enforcers in dystopian futures, and even the satirical tone was identical. Not only was the film delayed, the writer and director attached to Judge Dredd were cautioned not to make the film too much like RoboCop. This added to the slow development, and the movie was stuck in a limbo for quite a few years. film version of Mega City 1 is smaller than the comic book version. I've already pointed out in the video that the version of Mega City 1 shown in the film is quite an impressive portrayal of the futuristic dystopian cityscape, but not everything was perfect about the depiction. For instance, the Mega City 1 shown in the movie is much smaller than what we've seen in the comics. In the first scene featuring the council judges, a map of North America is shown, and Mega City 1 only spreads out up to the current New York metropolitan area, which is basically New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. On the contrary, the maps in the comic books have suggested that Mega City 1 covers most of the US eastern seaboard, and even the population is much bigger. In the comics, around 400 million people live there, but the movie shows only around 65 million. This was probably done to make things more manageable for the makers, and they wanted a more precise and selected region to go ahead. The role of Fergie is changed majorly in the film. There were quite a few major changes introduced in the movie adaptation of Judge Dredd, and one of the notable ones has to be the character of Fergie. In the comics, Fergie is depicted as a physically imposing, heroic, and sacrificial character who is remembered for his memorable and valiant death while helping Judge Dredd in the story The Day the Law Died. In the film version, Fergie becomes Herman Ferguson, who is more of a comic relief sidekick, the role played by Rob Schneider. This changes the character completely from the original tough and noble brute to the nervous and wisecracking hacker. Here, Fergie is whiny and spends most of the story providing jokes and banter, and I would have liked the original version better simply because he would have been better suited for the overall theme of the movie. The change was widely criticized by the fans, who felt that the heart and grit of Fergie's character was completely missing to fit the comedic persona of Rob Schneider. Controversies around the musical score of the film. The musical score associated with Judge Dredd didn't come by easily, and initially, the future James Bond composer David Arnold was roped in for the task. Danny Cannon had worked with him earlier, and he wanted David on board, but the producer Andrew Vajna wanted someone more established. This brought the legendary Jerry Goldsmith into the picture, and he created a rather powerful theme for the film's trailers. However, even Goldsmith could not stay on when the post-production delays affected the film because he had other commitments. Thus, he could not finish the complete score for the film. And finally, Alan Silvestri was hired for the same. He recorded the score in both London and Los Angeles, and what you hear in the final film is the one recorded during the Los Angeles session. All these changes and last-minute mismatches led to some confusion about the movie's musical voice, and it's a wonder that despite all these troubles, Alan Silvestri's final score is widely praised for featuring old brass, pounding percussion, and heroic motifs. A video game was released alongside the movie. I don't know if many are aware of this Judge Dredd video game that was released alongside the film. This was a side-scrolling action platformer game developed by Probe Entertainment and published by Acclaim. It was released for the Super NES, Sega Genesis, Game Gear, and Game Boy, coinciding with the Stallone film adaptation. This was not a hugely popular video game, but the gameplay was quite unique that allowed players to either arrest or execute criminals, which reflected Judge Dredd's dual capacity as judge and executioner. The player took control of Judge Dredd across levels inspired by both the movie and the original comics, where he would fight enemies and move through various dystopian environments. For many of the stages in the video game, the backgrounds were digitized from actual sets used in the 1995 film, while the rest were comic-inspired. Some fans have described this game as better than the film, and people liked the decent graphics and the replay value. You might just revisit the game for some memorable Judge Dredd action. Judge Dredd and the DC connection. No, Judge Dredd did not originate in the DC universe, but there is still a DC connection that developed around the same time as the 1995 movie release. During this time, DC published its own Judge Dredd comic series, and this featured an alternate version of the character and altered storylines that were not present in the original 2000 AD comics. The comic book run lasted for 18 issues, with different creative directions, such as portraying the Chief Judge Fargo as evil, which was not in line with the original comic book narrative. There was also a crossover called Batman Judge Dredd Judgment on Gotham, where Judge Death used interdimensional technology to attack Gotham City and caused Batman to team up with Judge Dredd. What were the vehicles featured in the movie? The movie required a lot of fancy vehicles, and a majority of the vehicles used in the film were actually Land Rover Forward Control 101s, which were originally used as a military vehicle. For this film, Land Rover designed and built all the 31 vehicles using the FC-101 chassis and a fiberglass body. Most of them were just meant to look cool, and only one among them actually had a properly fitted interior for the close-up shots. The others were totally bare inside, except for the controls and a driver's seat. You can still see the one with the furnished interior at the Planet Hollywood in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. How did the movie change the judge's costume and helmet? There were some changes made in the attire of street judges in the movie. In the comic books, they all wear the same body armor with golden shoulder pads with an eagle design on the right shoulder and horizontal plates on the left shoulder. The movie, however, has two kinds of body armor for the street judges, where the more senior ones sport an eagle on the right and horizontal plates on the left, similar to the comics, but the junior judges have horizontal plates on both sides. Even the helmets of the judges have been changed slightly in the movie. They don't have the crossing red bits in the center of the visor. As for Judge Dredd's badge, it's more chunky than the other judges' flattish badges. Also, it's worth noting that in the comics, the judge's gloves, boots, elbow, and knee pads are green, but in the movie, they're all shown to be black. A fan poll wanted Clint Eastwood as Judge Dredd. Way before the 1995 film was even conceptualized, there was a fan poll during the early 1980s run by 2000 AD Comics. It was for the readers to vote for their favorite actor as Judge Dredd in a movie, and the response was overwhelming. A vast majority of them claimed that they would love to see Clint Eastwood as Judge Dredd with Ridley Scott as the director. When the poll was conducted one more time during the late 1980s, Dolph Lundgren won the poll for the role of Dredd. I can only imagine how mesmerizing the movie would have been with the legendary Clint Eastwood as Judge Dredd and someone like Ridley Scott handling the direction, and it's a pity that it never really materialized. Arnold Schwarzenegger was also considered for the role. There was another action star during the era who had a similar or probably an even greater aura than Sylvester Stallone, and this was the iconic Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yes, he was indeed considered for the role of Judge Dredd during the early development of the 1995 film. During this time, there was reportedly another version of the script in the works, and this was more faithful to the comics and had a darker and horror-style tone. In this version, Arnold Schwarzenegger was set to star with the direction of Tony Scott, but it all fell apart because of behind-the-scenes conflicts among the producers and other creative differences. The original writer, Peter Briggs, was removed, and soon Schwarzenegger and Tony Scott left the project. The movie eventually moved in a different, action-oriented direction, and while I can't say if the movie would have been a better one with the earlier plan, the idea was surely promising. Everything you need to know about the reboot. I'm one of those who believe that the reboot in 2012 was better than the original, even though some might consider the 1995 version to be better. For this reboot film, Pete Travis was taken on board as the director, and it was written and produced by Alex Garland. Most fans have agreed that the reboot attempt featuring Carl Urban was a more faithful and gritty adaptation of the source material, and the story focused on Judge Dredd and his rookie partner, Judge Cassandra Anderson, as they attempt to bring order to a massive 200-story high-rise called Peach Trees, controlled by the ruthless drug lord Mama. The movie truly captured the dystopian and violent aspects of Megacity 1, and the campy elements of the original were completely eliminated. Marvelous verdict. The original Sylvester Stallone starer could have been so much better. The 1995 Judge Dredd movie is a classic case of missed opportunity because the film had just about everything required to become a smashing hit. The massive budget meant that the production values and effects were top-notch, and Sylvester Stallone was quite possibly the perfect casting for the titular Judge Dredd, if only he understood the actual theme of the comic books or the gravity of the character characters involved, and the producers didn't bow down to every single demand that turned this into a sloppy and generic action comedy. When it comes to the ideal Judge Dredd movie, I'll always pick the 2012 version, but the original still has a special place for me because of how it introduced the character into the cinematic world. It's fun to look back at the effort even today, and let's hold all the harsh criticism for now and focus on these amazing facts about the movie. Do let me know in the comments below what you think of the original Judge Dredd film, and also share your views on some of these insane facts that I brought to you in this video. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.